Hello everyone, my name is Roya. I have a cat tail in my way. Their iPod's like standing in my lap and walking around while I'm filming this. But anyway, I read 6 books in the latter half of May, and I am going to tell you about them. The best book of the month by far was Within the Sanctuary of Wings, which was my audiobook. This is the 6th and final book in the Lady Trent series by Marie Brennan, and I love these audiobooks. These books are so good, and if you don't know, the series is about a dragon naturalist in like fake 1800s era-ish, and this last one, I mean, obviously it's a sequel and the last book in a series, so I can't really talk too much about it, but I loved it. All the questions we get are answered, like all the questions we get in the like first 5 books, and it is just really, really awesome. Oh, and I said it was the 6th book, didn't I? I mean 5th and final book. There are 5 books. It is a quintet. So the first book that I finished in the latter half of May is The Waking Land by Cally Bates. This is an arc that I got at Y'all West, and this comes out on June 27th if you are wanting to keep an eye out for it. This book is about a girl named Ilana who was taken hostage by the king when she was like 5 because her father started a rebellion, and the king came along and said, okay, I'm going to take your daughter hostage, so if you set foot in my country again, I will kill her. Fast forward to when she's 17, and she's basically the king's ward and doesn't really know what side she's on or anything. She doesn't really feel any particular loyalty to her parents because she hasn't seen them since she was 5, but she never really forgot that she is a hostage. So one day, the king is murdered, and obviously everyone thinks that she did it, even though, like, there would be no point. Like, it would not be to her advantage at all to kill the king. So she has to run away. She rejoins with her own people, all that stuff. So what I really loved about this book is the world building. This is seriously some of the best world building I've ever seen in YA. And the political intrigue too, like all of that was seriously almost on par with adult fantasy, and I just loved that. I really want to see more of this in YA for sure because it's just so cool. But unfortunately, this book really lacked character depth, I felt like, and then also there was a lot that we didn't get a background on at all in the magic system in particular. So pretty much throughout this book, Ilana has this ability, this magical ability that nobody else does. So neither the normal magic nor the magic she has is really, like, we don't get any background on it. So for example, we don't really know, because she doesn't actually get her powers until she's 17, but we pretty much get the sense that her parents already knew, even when she was like really young, that she had these powers, and she's the only one who does. And presumably it's not inherited either because her parents don't. She's the only one who does. So we don't really know how it is that she is the one with these powers and why her parents knew about it, even though she didn't actually really get awakened to her abilities until her teenage years, when her parents didn't like know her, all that stuff. So that all didn't make any sense. And then also there was this whole part where, if you read the book, you know what I'm talking about. There's this like turning point where Ilana does something and it causes something magical to happen that's like really significant, and we are not told anything about that beforehand, and so it comes out of nowhere, and we kind of go, well, why, why is it that that caused that? Like, we don't know. We never find out. So that kind of stuff frustrated me a little bit. So while certain aspects of this book were really falling flat for me, I really loved the world building, like, so much. I thought it was really well done and really well thought out, and I really am excited to see what Cally Bates writes next. Next, I read the Arrows of the Queen trilogy, which consists of Arrows of the Queen, Arrow's Flight, and Arrow's Fall. This trilogy is about a girl named Talia who basically, she grows up in this border town where women aren't really allowed to do anything. They're not even really supposed to read books, and she loves to read books, and so she's like a total outsider there. And when she's 13, she's supposed to get married, and she doesn't want to. She would rather just, like, have a good life and not have to do that shit. So, then, like, pretty much right after she turns 13, she gets chosen by a companion, which is a white horse that's like an intelligent white horse that's magical, to be a herald. The first book was actually a reread for me. I read it when I was 18, so about like, or less than that. I read it over 10 years ago, I think. I might have still been in high school when I read it. I'm not totally positive. But basically, I remember not liking it very much about 10 years ago because a couple things about the plot just really bothered me. But this time around, those things felt a lot smaller in the grand scheme of things. And those were specifically the fact that the companion chooses, like, tells her he chooses her, wipes her memory of it, and then 2 weeks later or something lets her remember it again. And I thought, what is the point of that? Like, why not just tell her 2 weeks later? You don't need to, like, tell her, wipe her memory of it, and then let her remember it again. It didn't make any sense to me. And it still didn't make any sense to me this time around. I kind of thought, what the hell? And then also the way that the romantic relationships are treated in this book and actually throughout the series. So basically in this book, Talia and this guy named Skiff really like each other, and they say, hey, you know, I like you. Hey, you want to hook up later? Okay. So, but then they realize, hey, our schedules are conflicting so much, we can't have sex. Like, this is such a bummer. We're always too tired or too busy with all the stuff we have to do. So maybe we should just be friends. Have you never heard of dating or something? Like, you can be romantically involved and not necessarily be hooking up right away. Besides, they're like 13 to 15 years old. And I kind of thought, like, that's really weird that they would honestly just kind of go, hey, I like you. Hey, want to hook up? Like, let's go to my room. Okay. Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. I thought it was really weird, like, 10 years ago when I read this, and I thought it was weird now. But overall, like, the plot is actually really pretty compelling, and there are a lot of really great characters, and actually about half of the female characters are lesbian, and that made me really happy because queer characters are so seldom seen in fantasy that's written in the 80s. Like, I mean, it's seldom seen in epic fantasy now, unfortunately, but in the 80s, like back then when this was written, like, it was never in books, and I was just so happy to see that representation. So in the second book, we actually get more of a sense of what a herald actually does, because the first book just really conveniently leaves that out. And, but basically, so we actually see, like, we follow Talia going on, like, an adventure and seeing what a herald actually does and solving conflicts in all the different towns and all that stuff. But the romantic relationship was, again, portrayed really weirdly. So basically, Talia starts sleeping with this guy named Chris, who she's, like, really good friends with, when she's really in love with his best friend. And so it was really weird that they're sleeping together and then they're also having a conversation about, like, oh, so I'm really in love with your best friend. Oh, well, he likes you too. And it just made no sense to me. Like, like, literally, I have nothing against casual sex, especially in books, but when it gets to the point where you're sleeping with someone and confiding in them about your feelings for their best friend at the same time, and they're like, oh yeah, well, he likes you too. Like, it didn't make any sense. I thought it was really weird. So the third book was definitely my favorite, because it's the only one with an actual cohesive, like, overarching plot with villains and conflict relating to those villains, etc., etc. And all kinds of, like, horrible stuff happening to people that you, like, hope they get out of, all that stuff. So it's the only one that really does that in the series, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But Talia's love interest, who's, like, the guy she actually is in love with, like, frustrated me so much. So, I mean, yeah, I can kind of understand why he and Talia didn't just use their words. Like, there was actually a lot going on in their heads that was preventing them. Like, he had some stuff with his past, and she, like, didn't know why, like she didn't think she could talk to him because, like, he was just being really aloof and all this stuff. So there was, like, a reason. There were kind of reasons why they couldn't use their words, but honestly, the dude and his best friend, who could have explained everything and, like, knew what was going on, could have used their words. Like, honestly. And so it really frustrated me that they didn't. And there were also a few points where I kind of wondered what the point of that was, kind of like in the first book. Most notably, Talia gets married at the end of this book, and she has literally just been tortured almost to death and hasn't recovered yet and can't even walk. And yet they want to have this whole wedding ceremony, and her friend has to, like, carry her throughout the entire thing because she can't even walk. And it's like, come on. Like, what's the point? Just, like, have an officiant come to your damn hospital bed. Like, you don't have to get out of bed to get married if you're still horribly injured and scarred for life. My gods. So, like, that just made me go, what is the point, man? But overall, I really liked this series. I didn't love it or anything. I gave it 3 stars. Basically, I mean, it's totally characteristic of an 80s fantasy where, you know, it's a little bit episodic and a lot of that stuff. But parts of it were really, really good still. And, you know, Mercedes Lackey is one of my favorite authors, but this was not really my favorite of hers. And finally, I read The Toy Collector by James Gunn, and this is a book about a dude who, pretty much grew up, being really into different toys, and then as an adult starts collecting them when they become collector's items. And it's this really fucked up story that reminds me a little bit of Choke by Chuck Palahniuk, or pretty much anything by Jerzy Kosinski, where we have this narrator who may in fact be completely psychotic, and doesn't think that he is, all that stuff. This was lent to me by my friend Leilani, and this is literally the kind of thing that my husband Jay is really into. Like, he loves Fight Club and like everything by Jerzy Kosinski and everything by Chuck Palahniuk, and this literally reminded me so much of that stuff. Like, it's a really messed up story and everything. So I think if you're really into like that kind of story, you should seriously read this. But if you're not, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, because it is really fucked up with like a really unlikable narrator who's like psycho, and treats people like shit pretty much. So I know a lot of people might not be into that kind of thing, but you know, if you like Fight Club and Choke and whatever, like, you know, it's really good. So these plus one audiobook are the books that I finished in the latter half of May. Let me know if you've read any of these, and let me know what your favorite book that you read in May is, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!